More now on our top story, the shooting at the Fort Hood military base in the United States. 4 people were killed, including the gunman. More than a dozen were injured in an attack that revived memories of another mass shooting at the same base in 2009 when 13 people were left dead. In this case, the shooter was believed to be suffering psychological problems. He'd served in the military in Iraq. But it's once again raised questions also about gun control in the United States. I'm joined by Professor Brendon O'Connor from the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Nice to have you with us. This is a story that raises a lot of issues, and we'll work through a few of them now. But first of all, the issue of returning servicemen. I know this has been a big debating point in the United States, who return back home to not getting the right treatment and the right support that they would hope for, and many suffering psychological problems, which perhaps has led to what we've seen today.
Well, I think he was being treated. I mean, he had some diagnosis about whether he had post-traumatic stress syndrome or disorder was being worked through. So I think there was actually awareness that this man had pretty significant problems. But how you keep firearms out of the hands of people with these types of problems is very difficult.
Particularly on a military base.
Yes, there's been a lot of efforts after 2009 when those 13 people were killed at that same base in Fort Hood to make the base a much safer place, increase security, increase rules regarding who can carry firearms. But the availability of weapons in America is pretty easily accessible, particularly in Texas, so this individual would have been able to buy a firearm that he just wasn't supposed to bring it to work. And
when you look at the number, there are more guns in circulation in the United States than there are people. And of course, people jealously guard the right, the constitutional right, to be able to have a weapon as well. Why is it such a psychological issue, apparently a cultural issue in the United States, to have access to weapons?
Well, it's built up to a cultural issue. I mean, it was originally intended that maybe there was a right to bear arms as part of a militia. That's now become a personal right. It's a right which many people feel is a constitutional right, part of being an American almost. So it's tragic, I think, that it's got to that stage, that it's so embedded that you can't have a sensible conversation, as I think we did after the Port Arthur shootings in Australia, about the limits of guns, about the need to reduce them. Obama, after each of these shootings, has found it very difficult, even as the president, to put a message about reducing guns, about gun control. There's often a response, and I think there will be in this case, to say, look, if only more people on the base had a gun, this guy would have been shot immediately after his first shooting, and that would have been the answer. Now, I think that's ridiculous, but I think that debate arises more readily in recent times.
Why is it a lack of political leadership here, though? Because when you do look at opinion polls, and bearing in mind that there are huge geographical differences in the United States and the country is very divided, but if you look at opinion polls, the majority of people say yes, something does need to be done. But when it comes to the political will, the gun lobby can mount so much influence and so much pressure. Is there a lack of political drive and will and leadership to really take this on?
I mean, you're definitely right, Stan. I mean, the political will probably has been lacking, because whenever, there needs to be laws in the US Congress, whenever congresspersons go after gun control, the NRA, the most powerful sort of gun lobby in America, targets them. It attempts to get them pushed out of seats, particularly in the South. Anyone who opposes gun control has been very vulnerable. So you're right about public opinion. I mean, it's been a long time sort of standing thing that the public has wanted some more sensible gun controls, particularly around people with mental disorders. I mean, there's overwhelming support that someone like this should not be able to buy a gun. There should be some kind of background checks if he's on a special list in the military for this kind of disorder, stress disorder. So it is one of those things that you'd wish the president would wave a magic wand and say, look, enough's enough, but he requires really the Congress to make some action, and at the state level, politicians to act there.
Just finally, at every state of the union, Obama has put this on the agenda. He has tried to cajole, he has tried to use guilt even at times to be able to guilt people, guilt other congressmen to actually make changes here. Will it be a symbol of failure of his presidency if he is to leave office without change on this critical issue that he has put very much at the forefront?
You're right. He's brought people along to his State of the Union addresses who've been shot. Gabby Giffords, famously in Arizona, and he's tried to make the moral case, he's tried to make the political case. But I was looking at the 2009 shooting, and before that shooter used the gun, he spent days going back to the same gun shop and talking with the people who sold him the gun about how to use it. And that's a culture which is obviously hard to break. I mean, that story is unfortunate, but there's a commitment to guns and a belief in guns that is going to be very difficult to break.
Brendon O'Connor, a pleasure to have you on the program. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
My pleasure.